Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night Live in Lexington, you guys. My name is Catherine Kaufman, and I'm a psychic medium here in Lexington, Kentucky. And I have a every Monday night chat, live show, talk show. Tonight's guest is Shifu Karega. We have an ongoing series about the plasma electric universe. Tonight's episode is more archaeologically derived. We're going over King Arthur's conspiracy in Kentucky and the Welsh Indians in Kentucky. Welcome to everybody on the chat. We're going to start in on a little content, and then we'll do some shout outs. But I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. So start us off with, what is King Arthur doing in Kentucky?
Okay. Let's first do, what I want people to know is that a lot of this research comes through the Ancient Kentucky Historical Association and the work of one man, a couple men, but Jim Michael, who's now passed, and his book is not yet available. It's going to be republished. However, it's going to contain most of the evidence because he worked directly with Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett. And then Lee Pennington, who actually, if you search JOLE Productions and then type Welsh History in Bondage, you can order his DVD, and you can also see Lee Pennington, who's in Louisville, and he's a Kentuckian, interviewing Alan Wilson in Wales. And he has other great videos too, like the Bosnian pyramids and
now watch that, the Bosnian pyramids. Those were so interesting.
Yeah, he does a really good job. So basically, they're all contemporaries. They're getting older now, and the question is who's going to take over. And what amazes me is that this is not, when we say conspiracy theory, we don't mean like
it's just out of the norm.
It's out of the norm because I was raised certainly to believe that King Arthur was just a legend, a kind of a romantic myth, and there may have been some Roman soldier, and that maybe it was Somerset, maybe it was Winchester. Turns out all that's wrong. Okay, and there's actual archaeology that's been done, and it's been done in Ural's life. It's not like it's brand new. This was done in the 70s, 80s, 90s. Pretty much they had completed most of their work by the 90s. This is the main book that I'd like people to go and get. It's really hard to get Arturius Rex.
It's called The Holy Kingdom by Adrian Gilbert.
Right, and what he did was he went and he actually interviewed Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett, and they gave him pieces each time, and they got very strong evidence, whether it was stones like the Samson stone or the actual Arturius Rex headstone that they found, or the land of charters, and you can see in the margins of Bibles in these churches with actual names and who bequeathed land from here and there. There's always evidence. That's the most important thing. There's always evidence. And no matter where they went, they found new things. And the finding of new things, and they actually brought on archaeologists so that they could prove it. The mainstream British archaeology has avoided them. They are afraid. They have offered a debate. They have approached them. The BBC caught one of the archaeologists even said, "Oh, this is not such and such century stone." So the BBC came back. Alan says, "There's one over here." They go and they look, and they say, "Oh, the writing looks the same." And then suddenly the archaeologist starts changing his tune. But no credit ever given.
They do that in America too.
Right. And no credit ever given.
Right. Let's do some shout outs to our fans. Greg, Donna Kay, Priscilla, Carrie Gill, and I'm going to leave you to Facebook over here because you're nearer to it and I can't see it.
We've got a British Cook, the Fjorn Woods. Dave
Love
Smith,
you, British Cook.
Asya Kristeva, Brandy Medium.
And, if anybody is interested in truly Cornish recipes, you got to check out the British Cook on YouTube. So let's get back to our content. Sure. I'm so excited to uncover this.
So where do we start? Let's go back to.
Oh my gosh, I have no idea.
Julius Caesar. I think that's how you know, Adrian approaches it. And in England, they have a better grasp of history, but actually what he discovered, he's British, that they have no grasp of their own history. And this goes back to the early 1800s. There was an actual movement to disenfranchise British history because British history is based on the Trojans, on Aeneas. And Aeneas was supposed to have gone to Britain and therefore been the first royal bloodline. That obviously there were indigenous Britons there, but they were all kind of conquered and became part of the post-Trojan exodus. So this was British history, and it's in the stones. It's all throughout England's history and Wales and all the areas. So this is not, there's no Celtic. So this is in fact, the whole Celtic thing, that's a term that was created in order to hide the Welsh and Pictish history.
Yeah.
So the Trojan history was denied. However, we all know that in the 1800s, Troy was found. They never went back and actually rewrote these revisions that had been done in the early 1800s.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think?
I'll tell you exactly why it is. There's nothing strange about it. It's just that Wales had been impossible to conquer from England's perspective for centuries. They finally managed to by moving a certain prince to Wales, and he was born there, so he became a Welsh prince,
right.
And that's how they took over Wales. They didn't actually conquer it by conquest, and so it was very important that they stamp out Welsh language, the Cymry language, right? Yeah. Through kind of a trick of law. Yeah. But they tried to stamp out the Cymry language. Which to this day, it's just like the Cherokee. When you go to Wales, they have the Cymry script, the Ogham script, and the Colburn scripts on the signs. And some of the people still speak Cymry, and they're trying to. And their history goes all. I can't go all the way through the Cymry history, but it goes back to, according to Alan Wilson, right back to the Lost 10 Tribes. Okay, so we're talking some serious, important history.
That's way back.
Yes. I'm going to leave out. So one of the hardest things about this is it seems very fantastical, and I realize this, folks. And bear in mind that I'm trusting in the archaeology of people that they went and dug things up. Okay, and we're going to get to that. But from there, when Julius Caesar tried to conquer, he was rebuked 2 times in a row. And when he was rebuked, he kind of lied about it, and then he ended up making an alliance with the British kings. And they wanted to trade with Rome, and so when they traded with Rome, they had not exactly everybody agreed. There were British royalty that wanted to be involved with Rome, and there were those who fought against it. And it was a point of contention for several hundred years. And depending on the Roman emperor, sometimes they were more Romanesque, and sometimes they were more independent. Eventually, King Arthur I got the Romans out, and his lineage is a full. Then in the histories, there's like another King Arthur, and they're 250 years apart. So one of the things that Aaron and Barham immediately said, well, this is obvious that these are 2 different King Arthurs, and so they set about finding the lineage of what had happened. One? Right. And the important thing about this book is that it has, through all the research, not only does it have beautiful images, including the cave where King Arthur II was probably buried, but also the actual sword in the stone. Yeah, I would like for you to show them that a little bit closer. Okay, let's go this way. There's the sword in the stone. And the cave where he was buried. Gosh, you guys have Arthur to get this book. Show that to Instagram over there, over here. And then also there's the actual lineages. Of course, the names are quite different than what we're used to. For example, King Arthur the First's name was Arthwis. Arthwis? Arthwis, yes, but I don't know how to say it correctly because I don't speak Cymry. Say the word if you can. Let me find the. If you can. Gosh, yeah. Well, there's a number of what do you call the family trees in here, so it takes a little moment. But the bottom line is that Wales had been in a land where, in Glamorgan is where the actual Round Table and all of the history, you know, the legends that we are most familiar with, at least the beginnings, not the fanciful French and Spanish and German things. So here we go. So you have here the different kings, and you know this goes all the way back to Glamorgan. and it's talking about, you know, King William, etc. So, you know, Morrig, son of Tudrig, king of Glamorgan, and that's his wife, and then you know, who he's survived by, and it has in here the land of charters. Here's King Arthur's name, Arthris or Arthmael. So they each had different names, and you know, it's Madoc is in here.
You know what this reminds me of is some of the angelical names.
Oh yeah, well this is the important thing. The Welsh people were the first Christians there, not the Romans. In fact, at that time, when the Romans had come in, they were, you know, still throughout the Roman Empire having sported killing Christians. So the Romans at that time were still pagan. And then another interesting thing I found out was that some of the British who were selling out to do trade, they were doing it for like big villas and mansions. They'd send their family off to go live in Africa,
unlike
even.
What happens today.
And some of them were enticed by things like having central heating and better design, better architecture. But ultimately, they decided that they didn't want to be part of the Roman Empire. There was a lot of turmoil because of the constant bickering among the Senate and the Caesars. So, you know, there was a lot of topsy-turvy, and eventually they kicked him out. So now you have King Arthur and the tale of him defeating the Romans and then repulsing the later Anglo-Saxons, but that was 250 years later. So when they started looking, yes, it is. And when they started looking at the story of him defeating the Anglo-Saxons, and they started looking at the stones, and these stones a lot of times are just left outside of these churches in basically carports. They're not in museums. They're just standing around. And all the locals know about them. They grew up knowing that King Arthur was from their area.
Behind it.
Yeah, Alan wasn't actually from Wales. He moved there and to do more research on this subject, and he started just walking up and finding these things. He started finding mounds. He found where the castle was. He found where these battles happened. He found all these different evidences, and eventually they decided that it was a certain church, and that church, I can find the name of the church, that they bought it.
Wow.
And then, in a brilliant move, they brought in archaeologists and dug it up, and lo and behold, they found the headstone, and it said Rex Arturius, which was, you know, backwards, but it was the story goes that after the comet event in either 535 or 563, depending on whose histories, because there's a 30-year gap that was introduced, and it had to do with just different regions having different calendars, and it's explained in Adrian's book.
Yeah.
You know, he learned that from Wilson and Baron Blackett as to why the calendars were different for different regions of England. But whenever this cometary event happened, which burned England so bad that the French could see it for 10 days burning, they decided to leave. And it so happened that Prince Madoc had been blown off course by this same comet. And he ended up in a foreign land where there were people who dressed scantily and wore feathers and used bows and arrows. And so he comes back, he tells this fantastic tale. They don't believe him. So they send another ship, and they go over, and the guys come back within a couple of years and say, yeah, it's real. And this is all in the stones, people, according to Alan Wilson and Baron Blackett. It's all engraved.
It's all engraved in.
And so you can find the stones, you can read the stones, and if you learn the script, you can translate them. It's as easily, you know, they had one archaeologist.
And there's pictures of the
That's right. That's right.
So it's like you can't refute it. Let me make sure there's no questions here.
There was one archaeologist who held one stone for like 30 years, didn't make any headway. They finally got a hold of the stone, and within 2 days they'd made a workable translation, and it was very straightforward. It was, of course, sounding like ye olde English, but it was totally understandable, because they started using the script, the Ogham script and the Colburn, and they were able to make a lot of headway really fast. And some of this stuff has ties to the Hebrew, the Aramaic and the Hebrew scripts. So
Absolutely.
by looking at it differently, they made rapid progress, and this rapid progress led them to one discovery after another discovery after another discovery.
It's a chain reaction.
Yeah. So the interesting part is, they go and they look at the legend about this. So the guy comes back. He says, "Yes, King, they're there." So they had 700 ships built, and they all left. And it was on account of the fact that the land was inhospitable. And we see this in the Arthurian legends, that there was a plague and they needed therefore the Holy Grail, etc. Well, this quest was real. They disappeared over the sea, and nobody knew where they came from. But here's what we do know. At some point, it is recorded that King Arthur was slain, and he was slain in America or overseas. He was somewhere else, wherever this is. In Avalon, location. Right? So like far away. He's brought back, and he's mummified. He's like in a sack, basically. They put him in this cave, and for a couple years, then after they organize the lines of succession, then they have a real burial. And so all they have to do is actually dig it up. And on top of that, there's also a box that they found, a non-iron box under a mound, certain such and such a depth. And Alan Wilson thinks that might be the Ark.
It might be.
It might be, but the British archaeology won't let them dig it up because there are rules. You cannot yourself go and do the dig, so you have to get permission.
They just don't want.
Right.
They just don't want it.
Some of the Welsh authorities want to, because it's going to help the tourism if they can actually produce this stuff. Because you can go visit. You can go right now. You can book a trip to Wales and go visit these historic castles and these battles, these mounds, and there's nobody going to stop you from walking around except for the farmers. You just ask for permission. However, there's no infrastructure behind it because nobody has put that together. They put the research together, but they're just starting to think about how they could market this, but they haven't gone any further. So Lee, this is modern. He decided this is a really interesting idea. He wanted to bring the headstone here, but he couldn't if it was an antiquity. So they said, hey, you either declare this as authentic or you let us export it. So guess what? The headstone's here in Pennsylvania. Yay! And he's trying to get it on display in Louisville in a museum, but he's having a hard time.
This is Lee Pennington.
Lee Pennington. I call him Sir Lee Pennington, even though.
Yes.
Or Maestro.
And I hope you're watching tonight.
And he's a retired UK professor.
Yes.
And he has his own works, and we're going to try and get those out to people. So akha.us if you want to know more about
okay,
that.
let's check for questions and do a couple more shout-outs. I'm going to let you check Instagram for any questions. So, hey to Chastity, Sheila, Ina, James, Bruce, April, Seth. Shout out to John Philip Young, Nicole. Hey, Lee. Kisses to you, Lee. Thanks for joining us this evening. Shelly, Tricia, Pamela, Gwen, and let's see. Shout out to Rolando and a special kiss to Rolando. And Connie, Brock Powell, and Cynthia Lynch Carlson.
And also we have over here Michael Von Pagan.
So this is a lot.
It is a lot, and it's going to get even more interesting.
I know.
Okay, so that was I know, I brushed through it, and that's the backstory. Please, people, it's very expensive to buy the books, the Aaron Wilson books. This book is not very expensive, and it's very detailed. The names are heavy. It's sort of like reading Chinese, to be honest with you. There's a lot of names, but it's fascinating. If you are at all interested in England, British history, definitely this is the book to get, because you are going to see all sorts of history. You're going to see the stones. You're going to see the family lineages. You're going to see the land of charters.
Those pictures in there are just awesome.
Oh, they're amazing.
And
that's the best part about it, is the evidence. I don't jump into things without evidence, and I'm interested in evidence that leads to new evidence.
Right.
Because then there's something behind it. And I don't mean, one conspiracy leads to another conspiracy. I mean, hard data, hard facts. When people start, they buy a whole church, and then they start finding things at that church. I mean, you gotta listen to the possibilities. Now, the next part is where it's kind of there's a lot of different testimony and archaeological evidence. First of all, there's plenty of evidence that there was a Prince Madoc who came to America. There is some discrepancy as to whether it's 11th century or, as Wilson and Blackett contend, it was actually the 5th century. Or it would be 6th century. It'd be 500. So
500.
Right. So 6th century. I think there's more evidence for the 6th century one, and more. I think with the 12th century idea is where they didn't think anybody could be here that long ago. However, they've found more than 30 Roman coins throughout the Ohio River Valley.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, we have all these stone forts, and there was a stone fort, believe it or not. Of course, everybody knows about Indian Fort in Berea, but there was a stone fort actually just up the way from Louisville at Devil's Backbone at the Charlestown State Park in Indiana.
But you have
and they don't want you visiting the Devil's
to,
Backbone. It's so weird.
Like, you have to research this
you
stuff.
Have to.
It's not openly available to you.
And in fact, the destruction of that fort and using the stones, believe it or not, folks, to build a bridge in Louisville. The bridge is still there. You can go and see the stones yourself. But the cost of building it was more prohibitive. They could have just quarried new stone. Somebody deconstructed it, and they deconstructed it for a reason. And of course, there's people who are talking about this. You can check out the book Graves of the Golden Bear as to why that could possibly be.
Is that on Amazon?
Yeah, you can find it. It's by Rick Osman. Is it possible that it was all about, contention as to who owned it? Because we had just gotten the Louisiana Purchase not that long before. Perhaps England would have tried for some kind of claim. I doubt it, but for some reason the fort was deconstructed, and now you go and they tell you you can't go to the Devil's Backbone because it's too dangerous. Well, okay, or there might be something interesting there. It's hard to know. There are certainly lots of stones. There was a battle at the Falls of the Ohio. Perhaps 3,000 of these Welsh Indians, these whites essentially, who had come down, had gone native, and
were they descendants of?
That's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea. Yes.
Okay.
And that battle was so brutal that's when Kentucky became, because Esquipacatiki does not mean dark and bloody ground. It means land of blue meadows. So the war that created the dark and bloody ground was so traumatizing. There were natives who were coming with European explorers who were afraid to enter this area because the battle was so bloody. On top of that, the history of the mummies in Lexington and the catacombs, and that the natives here, with the modern natives like Cherokee and Shawnee and Delaware, were saying that this was an ancient race of white Indians who had been here. What does ancient mean to them? We don't know if that was 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago.
So
that's where all the Phoenicians and stuff.
Reference.
But we know that there's references in Welsh stones, and on top of that, you have mounds of the Adina Hopewell. Well, I would rather call them the Legui, who their mounds look exactly like the ones you find in Wales to this day. Whether they're conical mounds, circular mounds, hinges, the burial mounds, the long tubular burial mounds, because most of the mounds that people see, the conical mounds, are not burial mounds.
Right.
Right. And so it's usually the longer mounds that actually had the artifacts in them. And there are stories of Europeans who met with people. And if you want to read this, it's in Footprints of the Welsh Indians by Troxel. And they would meet with, this is like Spanish and French mostly, trappers generally, or military, and they would meet with natives who spoke almost Welsh. And some of them even seem to have Christian leanings, or maybe even remnants of biblical teachings. And there was even reports of them being very very tall, and for them, in their eyes, more handsome. And of course, the Mandan people were renowned. Well, only became mixed later because of the smallpox epidemic. Then they became mixed with the Hidatsa and other tribes. But historically, the Mandans were enemies of the Lakota. Well, who destroyed the Cahokia and the Mississippian culture? The Lakota. Right. And the question is why? It could be, as Rick Osman attests, that there was a large economic force in the Ohio Mississippi Valley area, perhaps looking for fluorite for smelting purposes. I contend that based on the Green River shell middens and other shell middens around like Tennessee River Valley, possibly there was an industrial pearl operation,
Mm-hmm.
because there's no way they were eating that many and they were piling them up in that way.
Right. There's no way.
Right. It's kind of silly. There were people, they
So
were working an area and they were putting them here.
Yeah, we had those shells and we had the fluorite. And fluorite
Right.
is still mined in Western Kentucky.
Yes. We have the world's largest mine, folks.
Yes, we do.
It's very dangerous mining, too, by the way.
Let me check for some questions. Hey to Teresa, Tom, Sharon.
What is this tying to? Yes.
George says, would this
George.
tie in with the great mound builders in the Ohio
Exactly.
Valley area? Yes, absolutely. And Kayla had wondered that as well. Tricia has a question or a comment. She says, I visited a castle years ago and remember feeling very heavy. There was too much going on. And
interesting to know where that castle was. Where was that castle, Tricia?
And Tricia, you can private message me if you want, or make a comment and give us a little bit more of the location there. Hey to Jennifer, and Cynthia says it appears much of England correlates closely to the USA, as in running America in some ways too long to go into.
Right.
After all, we have much of the USA with British names, absolutely. Plus the old adage that a king runs a country and a president runs a corporation.
Yeah, don't get me started on the corporatization of the United States.
So
you can find that document, by the way, people.
Hey to Danielle and Heather Ely. So George says, yes, have read a lot about the mounds and the Welsh mounds. Awesome. So Cynthia says, what about the mounds in Salamanca, New York? See them driving down Route 17.
It would depend. It's probably a descendant of the Hopewell culture, or one of the, there are several Hopewell cultures. And you can look at my map, the eastern sites, let's see, cultural sites of the eastern United States.
Okay, tell her where the map is.
Well, the easiest way to find that is from my portal. You go to sites.google.com/view/ARC Angel Projects, and on there is my map. And it's not complete, obviously. There's thousands upon thousands. People don't realize in Kentucky alone, one of the archaeological documents that have been produced and is available for you to actually go and look at says that there, at the time that they had revised the document in 2008, there are over 22,000 archaeological sites in Kentucky. Now tell me how many you're allowed to know of. How many sites are you allowed to visit? You know, how many serpent mounds do you know of? And how many of them are intact? I mean, the Kentucky from Above was just released. And of course, there turns out there's an earthwork, just like you would find at Newark or Chillicothe, right in the Red River Gorge. And I've never seen a trail or a display or anything for you to go and visit that earthwork. There's certainly no preservation. The forest is totally destroying it.
Tricia says that location is in France.
Okay, well, you know, I don't know. I mean, obviously the Normans, there was a huge history, and without going into the Normans and the Welsh, and you know, sometimes they were able to get a foothold and sometimes they weren't, and there's a lot of back and forth. You know, I'm sure.
Do you think there might have been artifacts there that she was sensing but didn't?
There's so much history. It's very likely that there is. You know, we've been talking about plasmoids.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
But I think there's probably been a whole lot that's been released.
Hey to Laura Herring, and Cynthia has a question. Why do have the largest obelisk? Does this have to do with the lineup status, longitude, or latitude?
Who has the? I'm not sure who has the largest obelisk, but
I thought Egypt had the largest obelisk.
That's what I thought. I know that Kentucky, believe it or not, we have the world's seventh largest obelisk.
Dang.
Yeah.
Check for questions over here on Instagram.
Can you tell if we were to discover something that might be historical, where do you go to get info to us naive people? Well, you could contact us at the Ancient Kentucky Historical Association. We might be able to help.
And that's on Facebook.
Right. You can join the Facebook group. That's free. And ancientkentucky.com with an E.
Kentucky, Kentucke.
Yeah, and you can, of course, get the newsletter and get tied in, come to meetings, and we'll talk about this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's
joining the Facebook group to get more information.
I have here actually what was on the stone. Listen to this: Rex Arturius, but it was, you see how it was spelled here with a V,
Mm-hmm.
Philly, and then again Moravitius. So King Arthur, son of Werig. So now we know who King Arthur is. So they have his father, they have his grandfather, they have his great grandfather.
They have his
all
genealogy.
the way back. Yes, the whole thing is it. All they had to do was open up the Bibles in these old churches. Believe it or not, they had made copies in a lot of cases, and they'd made copies of the margins. And then some of them are the original Bibles, and you can just see.
We're so lucky to still have.
And they're what's interesting is these things they sound ridiculous, but when you read it, you're going, well, nobody would make this up because it's the most boring reading. It's all like land grants and we're bequeathing this much.
Documentation.
Somebody killed his brother, and so they had to. You had to donate to be let back in the church. So that kind of stuff that is very typical of human. It's as if it's a normal chapter of human history that it just poof went away. And now here it is back again if we just go and look for it. And of course
it's back again because we need to know exactly what happened.
I think so. I think that
people are figuring out that the history that we've been fed all these years is not right.
Yes, it's not only people of color whose history has been denied them. It's my people were Basque. It's the British people who were forced into believing that they were descended from Celts and they may have been actually Pictish or Welsh or some other Germanic tribe that had come over had survived Doggerland's collapse.
Cynthia says, why does Kentucky something largest obelisk I hear? So we're only aware of Kentucky having the 7th largest obelisk.
It's the 7th, and that was built by I believe the Kentucky Daughters of the American Revolution.
Okay, Philip Travis has a question. What is your opinion of the Serpentine Mound in southern Ohio? Do you believe they were constructed in order to be seen from the air?
No, I don't, but I do believe that there's 3 really interesting things about the Great Serpent Mound. Number 1, it's clearly not a snake eating an egg. It is clearly, there's a bow shock on the front, and there's no snake that has something. And also, we don't have tropical snakes here that eat eggs on a regular basis. There are more than 30 of these serpent mounds, most of them eating an egg. So they're not serpents at all.
We talk about this as far as the plasma.
I think it's in the second episode that we did.
Second episode, Philip,
and then
of the plasma electric universe. I'll try to send you a link to the video exactly, but I think we went over that as far as it being a representation of a plasmoid.
Right. Well, no, of the comet. And then its plasma tail, which has been seen scientifically. The plasma tail is still behind Venus. They actually have found that. That was something that Velikovsky predicted, and I talked about that in the Velikovsky Conundrum episode.
Yes.
It's something he predicted, and they actually saw it. Here's the other interesting thing about the Great Serpent Mound. It's built over a comet impact site, which doesn't obey comet impact rules, and somehow the natives knew that the energy, I would say that they felt the energy.
They studied the stars. They actually knew more about the stars and the universe than we
do.
Well,
my contention would be that it's possible that site was chosen because it was a thunderbolt strike. Remember in the Delaware, the legend from the Delaware they gave to Thomas Jefferson. They said the great man came and sat down and with the stamp of his foot. So possibly the stamp of his foot was there at the Great Serpent Mound. And that the thunderbolt that came down and struck. And if you want to know more about that, two books I would definitely recommend. A simple book would be The Thunderbolts of the Gods by David Talbot.
Right.
And it's got pictures and everything. It's really beautiful. And you could follow the Thunderbolts project on YouTube. They just released another Discourse of an Alien Sky. And then the Electric Sky, which is all scientific, but it's easier to understand.
And show that to Instagram over there. So let me do a couple more shout outs. Hey to Jay Ross, Alicia Beatty Witt, Robbie Prince, Sharon Jacobs Norris, and so Cynthia says, I'm sorry I meant Kentucky having the largest for this height of anything else in Kentucky. Absolutely. Are these ties to something that would be like PVO tracking to a plane to clarify one location of set things spiritually speaking? These mounds are all over the states. Can some be seen now only by satellite?
Yes, actually, there are several here, even in Lexington, that can only be seen with LiDAR, which is not satellite, it's airplane scanning. The possibility of the obelisk location being chosen, I don't think it's likely in this case because it was Jefferson Davis's homeland. That's why they chose it. It is a unique obelisk in that it's poured concrete layer by layer. It could not be made today. The cost of it would prohibit it. They wouldn't allow it because it's not supported internally by anything but the elevator structure. I'm worried personally if the New Madrid goes that it might be the end of that obelisk.
Oh yeah, it would be,
you never know though, because the obelisk is renowned for its stability. It just depends on the quality, because I don't believe they used rebar is the issue that I think that. So it's a wonder. You should go to it. They defunded it, so it's not supported by the state. Yes, political correctness.
So go and look right away.
Go down there.
Go and look, take pictures before it's all gone. And you know what? We are out of time.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Did we get through?
What do you want to hit on real quick?
Oh, so it is possible that
we've got to do Jim's books.
I know. Well, Jim, again, I'll read the name, but it is possible, and it'll all be dependent on what's in Jim's books, and to see the evidence. I mean, there's been things been found in mounds. There's inscriptions on caves. It is possible that King Arthur, and here's the hardest part, may have died here in Kentucky in Menifee County.
Believe it or not.
Believe it or not, it's possible.
Believe it or not,
there are many people that want to contend for it. If you're interested in diffusionism, subscribe to Ancient American Magazine. There's a lot on these different topics from different points of view, Phoenicians and Atlanteans and all sorts of giants and, all sorts of interesting diffusionist topics.
But we need to know these things.
We need to know. And it is possible. I'll tell you one weird story. When I was out at the Natural Bridge, when you are first going across from the chairlift, there's a pinnacle of rock.
Right.
And I always told Arwen, I always said, if I were to make Avalon, I'd put it right there. Now, I said this years and years ago. Now, am I drawn? Lee thinks I'm just drawn to this stuff, that I'm out solving all these mysteries because of my past, my Iberian blood and everything.
Like being a professional psychic, that's part of the intuitive process.
You don't know. And Kentucky is so mysterious. It's so interesting. The Elegui are the most mysterious. We know more about the Mayans, even with the new stuff that was found with LiDAR, the millions. We haven't explored that at all. It's all jungle controlled. But we still know more about the Mayans because we've actually decoded what they've written. We know more about them than we know about the Elegui. And that's, if anybody tells you at Chillicothe, Newark, that we have any idea, if you go to Toltec like I did in Arkansas, we don't know. I mean, the first thing, the Toltec one, they had these huge mounds, and they're going, oh, it's religious, and I'm looking at it, and there's water here, and I'm going, this looks to me like it was a naval empire. So, and they moved on when the water probably changed location.
But that is what happens with so many different archaeological sites. When the water receded, or when the pollution from the population got too much, they shut that site down and moved. And everybody is like, oh, why did this society?
Sure, yeah. Disease,
go
they
away.
ate all the mammoths.
Well, it's pretty simple.
It's unbelievable the idea that Paleo Indians ate all the mammoths. And I'm going, there is no evidence for that. There's like 7 sites in the entire United States where they've been found, they've been eating a mammoth. Like, it's too dangerous. I mean, if you are a small tribe, you would not take on the world's largest with tusks that are 8 feet long. It's a complete fabrication, of course.
Okay, so
thank you, George.
We're done for the evening. I'm going to do a couple shout outs for Jim's books.
Oh yeah, I'll read it.
Ancient Kentucky Inscriptions, Prince Maddox, Fact or Fiction.
That's right.
That's the first book. The second book is Ancient Amerindian Inscriptions with Old World Connections.
Yeah,
now,
right.
Kentucky is spelled Kentucke.
Again, those might be hard to find. Arlen, who is in the AKHA, is trying to get one of the 2 reproduced. I'm not sure which one is going to get republished. And then there's the Arturius Rex, if you can find it, by Alan Wilson. There's a lot of presentations. In fact, if you go to akha.us, I've in the videos click the view more, there's embeds, and you can learn for free. You know, there's all these YouTube videos you can certainly use.
So if you're interested in more about this and you want to know more, you want to follow the information, go to the Facebook group Ancient Kentucky Historical Association, and it's KENTUCKE, Kentucky. Right. AKHA.
Yeah.
All right.
And there's all sorts of links on the website as well for things. And please consider joining and get I put an article about the Red River. You can see the LiDAR scan from the Red River Gorge from the earthwork. So
Cynthia wants to know, are these the books that we referenced Amazon or Barnes and Noble?
If they're in print, then they should be both. And then some of them will be very expensive.
Cynthia, that the things that are currently in print you can get off of Amazon. If you're looking for something that's more out of print, Barnes and Noble can help you a little bit more than Amazon can.
When it comes to the Electric Universe ones, some of them are a lot cheaper gotten through. There's a specialty website that is linked on the Electric Universe Gateway, and hopefully people remember how to get to
You'll have to put that
right, we'll have to put the links again.
Because we always have new people that are tuning in.
There's a new section on that site, by the way. So there's not only the Shifus Learning Series, because all our stuff is on there now, and there's links to you know, the Suspicious Observers and the Sky Scholar, but there's a section on research papers, so that people can, and it's searchable, so you can start looking at the dark matter papers and the next episode is
going to be dark matter and everything that's linked to that.
So we got to talk about the changing directions of the plates. The tectonic plates are changing directions and velocities.
Yeah,
it's going to be a lot of fun.
Well, we'll leave that little bit of juicy information in your ear for the next time, and that'll be sometime in April. Watch my notifications, mark C first, and you won't miss any of the shows. And we've extended our time a little bit for you tonight. Kisses to everybody. Kisses from Kentucky.
Thank you.
You guys have a fabulous evening and a fabulous week, and we will see you, or I will see you next Monday night for another Monday Night Live and